Good morning, friends. Today I'm going to start a topic called tables and slicers. Table is a wonderful feature which has been introduced in Excel from 2010 onwards, and slicer also is a wonderful tool which has been used to slice and dice the data. Slicers are nothing but they are the big brothers of filters which are predominantly used to slice the data the way we want it. Okay. First of all, I would like to show you the conventional filters and the problems that we face in conventional filters, and then run through the journey of tables and slicers. So people, I have opened a file here. If you can see here, I have a data for around 148 employees. Let me use a shortcut to see the last row in this data. Control Shift down arrow. You can see I have a total of 148 employees or 148 rows. Let me again press a shortcut key, Control Home, to go back to my first cell. So now this data is in the form of a range. When I click anywhere on this data, I don't get a design tab, which means this data is in the form of a range and it is not a table. Now let us first run through of how to use filters. Let's say in this particular data which I have, if I want to know out of 148 employees, how many employees are working for a location called Dubai? The first solution to this is I will apply a data filter. So how do I apply a data filter? I just select my data, I click on the data tab, and in the data tab I click on a command called filter. And now people, you can see there is an icon of filters on each of the column headings. Now my requirement is I want to know how many employees are working for a location called Dubai. So let me come to my column H, which is the location column, and I'll click on this filter, and you can see all the locations are listed here. I will uncheck everything and I will only check Dubai, and I click on OK button. So now the data is filtered for a location called Dubai, but I want to know a total count of employees who are working for this location called Dubai. As I know the total number of employees was 148 employees, I want to know how many employees are working for Dubai. So the easiest way to count is I will select this column H. This column H is a text column. So the moment I select the column H, in the taskbar you can see the count as 61. 61 is basically including the column heading. So in totality, there are only 60 employees who are working for a location called Dubai, or alternatively, if you can see here on the left hand side of my screen, it indicates there are 60 employees out of 148 who are working for a location called Dubai. So I applied a filter on a location called Dubai. Now in this filtered data, I want to apply another filter where I want to know out of these 60 employees, how many of them are managers, which means I need to apply a filter on a column called job level. So let me come to job level column and let me click on this filter, and I will uncheck non-manager and I will check only manager and click on the OK button. So now the data is filtered further to show only those employees who are working for a location called Dubai and who are managers. I want to know a count of this. So let me just select this column. I get a count here 13, which is including the column heading, but the correct filtered data is shown here. That is 12 out of 148 records is basically the filtered data of those employees who are managers who are working for Dubai. Now one more thing in this filtered data I want to know is the total sum of this salary of these 12 employees. So if I click on this column I in the taskbar, since salary is a numeric column, I can get all these summarizations: average, count, sum. So you can see a sum of 837,391 is the total salary of 12 employees who are working for a location called Dubai and who are all managers. This is how I filter my data in a conventional method. But now I am going to show you something different by using tables and slicers. Let me just close this file for the time being, or minimize this file. Okay, people, I have converted the same old file which I just demonstrated to you in the form of a table, and above this table you will see these rectangular boxes. These rectangular boxes are called slicers. This is this is a feature which has been introduced in Excel 2010 onwards. Slicers are nothing but filters which are used to slice my data. So now if I want to apply the same filters which I had applied on the previous file, let me just apply now. On a slicer of location, I will click on Dubai. So the moment I click on Dubai, my data gets sliced. Let me scroll down and show you. If you can see in the location, everything is Dubai. Then the next slicer which I am going to apply is on job level, which is manager. Let me click on manager. Now the data is sliced on managers. Now I want to know the total salary of my 12 employees who are managers and who are working for a location called Dubai. So now in a table, I have an option of adding a summarization row, which is also called as a total row in the bottom of my data. So to switch on the total row or the summarization row, I click on the table, I go to design tab, and in the design tab, there is a command called total row. I check this option. The moment I check this option, I get a total row here in the bottom. You can see this is the total row, and this total row by default, it is giving me the count of employees, and in the salary column is a numeric column. If I click on this particular cell and there is a drop down, if I click on this drop down, I can see various summarizations. Since it is a numeric column, I can click on sum. Let me expand the column. You can see the sum of salary for all these 12 employees. So people, this is the most efficient way of slicing and dicing the data using tables and slicers. Now let me run through of how to create slicers and how to convert the data from a range to a table and apply slicers on the data. So let me close this file and let me open a file. Okay, people, this is a file where the data is in the form of a range. How can I say that it is a range? If I click on any cell in this data, I don't see a design tab here. So hence this data, what you see from column A to column I, is in the form of a range. So there are two prerequisites of creating a slicer. So when I want to create a slicer on a given set of data, the first prerequisite is the data should be in the form of a table. If the data is in the form of a range, I cannot create slices. So the first prerequisite is I need to convert my data from a range to a table. And once I convert my data from a range to a table, the second prerequisite is the slicers can be created only when based on a particular version of Excel. So for example, if I am using an older version of Excel, for example, if I am using Excel 2003 or Excel 2007, even though if I convert my data from a range to a table, I cannot create slicers. So I need to have a higher version of Excel. So if I have an Excel version of 2010, I cannot still create slicers on a table, but I can create a slicer on pivot tables. But from Excel 2013 onwards, slices can be created both on a table as well as on a pivot table. So currently I am using Excel 2013. So hence I can create slices on a table. So the first prerequisite, I need to convert this data from a range to a table. So in order to convert this data from a range to a table, I need not select the entire range. I can just click on any one cell of my data. I have clicked on cell A1. Now when I clicked on cell A1, as you know, the shortcut to create a table is, the shortcut key is Control T. So I'm pressing Control T. The moment I press Control T, you can see this window popping up and the entire data is automatically selected. The data which is selected by Excel is A1 to I149. A1 to I149. So people, the data has been selected and Excel has automatically selected my table as headers. The first row is a column heading and I'm okay with this. I'll click on the OK button. So the first step is I have converted my data from a range to a table. Now if I click on this data, you can see a design tab and the name of this table given by Excel is table 1. If I want to change the name of this table, I just click on this text box and I change the name. As you know, the best practice is to start with a keyword called TBL underscore and I'll call it as people. People is the sheet name, so I have given the name of this table as TBL underscore people. So my first step is I have converted the data from a range to a table. Now the next step is I need to bring slicers on this data. Now my first question to all of you people, can I bring slicers next to this column I? Meaning to say, can I bring slicers here? Yes, I can bring slicers next to column I, but today my data is still column I. Tomorrow, if I want to add 2 more columns next to column I need to shift my slicers. So hence, this is not advisable. Similarly, can I have my slicers below my data? Below my data here, after 149 rows. Yes, I can have the slicers below my data also, but the same thing applies. Today, I have data up to 149 rows and I need to add another 10 rows in the future. I need to again shift my slicers. So this is also not advisable. As a good practice, the slicers always should be above my table. So now I need to insert a blank row so that I can bring my slicers. I don't have blank rows above my table, so I will insert a blank row now. To insert a blank row, people, I am selecting row number 1. So in the row number 1, you can see the column headings. I am just selecting row number 1. And let me teach you a shortcut of how to insert a blank row above my row number 1. So I have selected the first row and I am using a shortcut key from my keyboard. The shortcut key to insert a blank row above my data is Control Shift plus. I'll repeat once again. The shortcut key which is used to insert a blank row is Control Shift plus key. Automatically a blank row is inserted above my table. Now, is this row height sufficient for me to bring the slicers? No. I need to increase the row height. How do I increase the row height? I select the first row. People, I would request you to put your cursor on this row number 1. You can see the cursor appearance is like a arrow mark, and now I will right click from my mouse. When I right click from my mouse, a pop-up window comes in, and then I will click on row height. By default, the row height in my Excel sheet is 15. The unit of measurement is millimeter. It is 15 millimeter. I can change as per my own convenience. I will change the row height from 15 mm to 100 mm. You can define your own height, people. And I'll click on OK. So the row height has been increased from 15 mm to 100 mm. Now I am going to insert slicers on my data. Now one important thing which you need to remember, people, that before you insert a slicer, your selection should be inside the table. In case if your selection is outside the table, you cannot insert a slicer. So please remember to select any one cell inside your table. No need to select the entire table. You can just click on any one cell inside the table, and then we'll start the process of inserting a slicer. Now my selection is in cell B4. I'm inside the table. Now to insert a slicer, I will click on the insert tab. So I'm clicking on the insert tab. Now in the insert tab, in the filters section, I have an option or a command called slicer. So let me click on this command called slicer. So the moment I click on this command called slicer, you will see a rectangular box popping up as you see in my screen. In this rectangular box, you will see the column headings coming from my table. So in my data, in my table, I have different column headings. All those column headings are listed one by one. So you can see employee code, you can see first name, hire date, you can see all these column headings which are shown in the table are listed in this rectangular box. Now I am going to insert slicer. As you know, people, that slicer is nothing but a filter which is used to slice and dice my data. Now before I insert a slicer, let me ask you some questions. Now people, if you see, I have a column called department in my table. Now this department column, the data type is text because all the data is in the form of a text. Now let me ask you a question. Can you insert a slicer on department? The answer is yes, because I can slice the data. Similarly, can I slice the data? Can I bring a slicer on designation? Yes, I can bring a slicer on designation because I can slice the data based on different designations. Similarly, I can bring it on job level, I can bring it on cost centers, I can bring it on locations. But can I bring a slicer on a column called salary? The answer is yes, and the answer is no. Why the answer is yes? Yes, I can insert a slicer on salary column. Excel will not stop me doing it, but it will be of no use to me. Why? Because the salary column has different salaries for each employees, and hence even if I bring a salary slicer, I cannot slice the data because I don't have common elements or common data where I can slice it. So hence you have to decide on which all columns you can bring slices which can make relevance to your data. So now people, I am going to insert only one slicer. I will do some formatting on that slicer so that when I bring other slicers, I don't want to repeat the same effort. Now I will bring a slicer on a column called location. So I am selecting location column and I'll click on this OK button. The moment I click on the OK button, you can see a rectangular box coming onto my screen. This rectangular box is nothing but called as a slicer. This is nothing but a big brother of filters. So I have selected only one column called location to insert a slicer. So Excel has created a slicer for me for a column called location. So the moment I click on the slicer, you can see these circles, which means this slicer is selected. The moment I click on the slicer, you will see a new tab appearing on my ribbon, which is called as the options tab. The moment I click outside somewhere the slicer, the options tab disappear. So this options tab will appear only when I click on the slicer. When I click outside the slicer, the option tab disappears. So please make sure that whenever you want to do any changes to the slicer, you need to click on the slicer. When I say click on the slicer, don't click inside the slicer. If you click inside the slicer, you will be actually slicing the data. So when I say click or select on the slicer, please select on the top. The moment I select on the top, the slicer is selected and I get an options tab. Click on the options tab. There are different options here which we will be using it as we move forward. Now, as you see, I have brought a slicer. Now this slicer is overlapping my data. Now the first step which we will do is we will place our slicer in an appropriate position. So select the slicer, hold your mouse button and drag it to the leftmost corner of your Excel worksheet. I have placed my slicer in the leftmost corner. Now my slicer is overlapping my table. I want to reduce the height of my slicer. In order to reduce the height of my slicer, the first step is please make sure that your slicer is selected. My slicer is selected. The moment my slicer is selected, you can see an options tab. You can click on the options tab. Now in the options tab, in the rightmost corner where I am hovering my mouse, there are two commands. One is a button command and the other one is a size command. Now in the button command, you can see different options: columns, height and width. Similarly in the size, I have height and width. Now if I want to reduce the height of the slicer, I will use this height and width and these arrow marks to reduce or increase the height and width of the overall slicer. But this height and width, I can use it to increase or reduce the height and width of the buttons inside the slicer. Now as a first step, I want to reduce the height of the overall slicer. So I will use this height and width of the size command. So I will just start reducing the height by clicking on this triangle. Now I'm starting to reduce the height. So now you can see my height of the slicer is getting reduced. Now I'm going to stop because my height of the slicer is not, now the slicer is not overlapping my table. Now I have reduced the height, but in my slicer you can see a horizontal scroll bar, which means now the data in my location slicer is shown in one column. I don't want a slicer, I don't want a horizontal scroll bar. Instead, I want to see all the entries together. So now again I click on the slicer in the options tab. In the button section, you can see a feature called columns or a command called columns. By default it is one column, which means the data is shown in one column. Now I am going to increase from 1 to, let's say, 2 or 3 columns. The moment I make it to 3, my data in the slicer is shown into 3 columns. Previously the data was shown in one column, now the data is shown in 3 columns. But the other problem in the slicer is I cannot read the entries of my slicer correctly. I can see a lot of dots, which means I need to increase the width of my slicer. So again I click on the slicer in the options tab. In the size command there is a command called width. I am going to increase the width now. So I am increasing the width of my slicer till the time I can read all the entries correctly. Now you can see my slicer where I can read all the entries correctly. The data is shown in 3 columns and there is no scroll bar. My slicer is almost ready now, but before I continue, I also want to change the appearance of my slicer, which means I need to give a proper color to this. So now again I click on the slicer, I go to my options tab. Now in the options tab there is a feature called slicer styles. Now in the slicer styles you can see some rectangular boxes with some light colors, and there is an arrow mark here which says more. I click on this more. You can see some dark colors. You can select any color of your choice. Let me select this blue color. I have selected this blue color. Now the appearance of the slicer has changed. Now the color, the color of this slicer has turned to blue. If you want to change to any other slicer, you can click on green, you can click on orange. I am selecting blue. So now I have applied a particular color to my slicer. I have changed the color to it. Okay. And now people, I am going to bring other slicers. Now to bring the other slicers, again please make sure that your selection should be inside the table. So I am clicking on any one cell inside the table. I have clicked on one cell, and now once I have clicked on one cell, now again I need to go to insert tab. Now in the insert tab, in the filters section, I am going to click on slicers. Now I am going to bring 3 or 4 more slicers. Now I am going to select department, job level and cost center. Okay, before this people, one more thing I want to show you is this color I want as a standard color to all the other new slicers which I am going to bring. So to do that people, click on the slicer, click on options tab. Now this is the blue slicer style which I have applied. I just hover my mouse on that blue color slicer, right click and say set as default. Now by doing this, any new slicer which I am going to bring, all the slicers by default will come with a blue color slicer style. Now I am going to bring 3 or 4 more slicers on my table. So to insert a slicer, I will click on any one cell inside the table. I will click on the insert tab. Now in the insert tab, I will click on slicer. Now in the I get this rectangular box. Now I can select multiple columns to bring slicers. So I am selecting the department column, I am selecting the job level, and I am selecting the cost center. So predominantly I have selected 3 columns to bring slicers, and I click on the OK button. So the moment I click on the OK button, you can see 3 rectangular boxes depending on the columns for which I want these slicers. Now I am going to arrange these slicers. Let me just arrange my slicers. So I bring my department next to location. I will reduce my height of the slicer. I have reduced the height. Now my data is shown as one column. I need to make it into 2 or 3 columns so that the scroll bar disappears. I made it 2, I made it 3. The scroll bar disappeared, but I cannot read all the entries, which means I need to increase the width of my slicer. I am increasing the width of the slicer so that I can read the entries correctly. Now I can read the entries correctly. Now let me bring the job level next to it. Let me reduce the height of the job level slicer. I have reduced the height. Let me reduce the width so that I can read it properly. I have reduced the width. I can still read the entries of my slicer. Then let me arrange my cost center, reduce the height of this cost center slicer. Okay, let me reduce the width also. Okay, So people, all my 4 slicers, I have arranged them properly and I can read the entries correctly. I have brought 4 slicers. Now you will see the benefit of slicers. Now I want to slice my data. So now I want to slice on a location. I want to know how many employees are working for Dubai. I just click on this Dubai button inside the location slicer. So my data gets sliced on Dubai. And now I want to slice it on a slicer called job level. I want to know out of these employees who are working for Dubai, how many of them are managers. I click on managers. So people, if you see my data has been sliced, it will show me those employees who are working for location called Dubai and managers. But now I want to know the count of these people, which means I want to know, as I told you in the start of this video, that I can also add a summarization row or a total row in my table. So now I'm going to add a summarization row, and the summarization row, the total row will always come below my table. So to switch on the total row can be switched on only when my selection is on the table. So I need to click on any one cell inside my table. Now to switch on the total row or the summarization row, I need to click on the design tab. Now in the design tab, you will have a command called table style options. In the table style options, I will check this option called total row. The moment I check on this total row, you can see a summarization row coming in the bottom of my data, which is called as the total row. I am highlighting this. You can see this is my total row. Okay. And by default, Excel has given me the sum of the salary column, because the salary column is a numeric column. And now when I click on this cell, which is the column I 151, and there is a drop down. When I click on this drop down, you can see different summarizations. Now since salary is a numeric column, I can select average, I can select count, I can select max, I can select min, I can also do sum. So I can select any one of these summarizations as listed in the drop down. Similarly, these summarizations are available for each column of my data. So when I hover my cell in the location column, I will get a drop down. But people, location column is a text column. The only summarization of the mathematics that I can do on a text column is count. So it will count the total number of records. But by mistake, let's say if I select sum, it will give me 0, because on a text column I cannot do summarization of sum. So I will apply count. So this total column can be switched on or switched off as per your own convenience. Now in order to switch off the total column, again I click on the table, I go to my design tab and uncheck this total row. The total row will disappear. So as and when you require the total row, the summarization row, you can click on the table, click on design tab and switch on the total row. Okay, one important thing that you need to know is when the total row is on in your table, if you want to append new data to your table or add new rows to your table, Excel will allow you to add new rows of data or new columns of data. But the problem is when you add new rows of data below the total row or new columns, it will not be a part of your table. And hence people, whenever you want to append new rows or new columns or add new rows or new columns to your table, please make sure to switch off the total row and then append or add new rows or new columns. So please remember this. Now let me switch off the total row. Let me go to design tab and uncheck the total row. The total row is switched off. Now people, there are totally 4 slicers which I have inserted. Now out of 4 slicers, in how many slicers I have sliced my data? By the appearance of these slicers, can we identify that in how many slicers we have sliced the data? Yes. If you see in the location slicer, here I have a filter icon with a X mark, which is enabled, which means I have slice the data on location slicer. Similarly, in the department slicer, this is disabled. The filter icon and the X mark is disabled, which means I have not sliced any data on department slicer. On the job level slicer, it is enabled, and let's see in the cost center, it is not disabled, which means out of 4 slicers, I have sliced my data in location slicer as well as in job level slicer. Now, how do I unslice my data? To unslice the data, you can just click on this clear filter icon in each of the slicer. the data will get unsliced. In department anyhow disabled, no need to clear it, but in the job level it is still enabled. I will click on this clear filter button, it gets disabled. Let's see in the cost center, do I have it? None. So now I get all my 148 records of data. So you can slice it by clicking on this clear filter icon button. Now let me show you how to unslice or unfilter in one go. Let me just slice it on location Dubai, manager, HR. Now ideally if you see, out of 4 slicers, I have sliced on 3 slices: location, department and job level. If I want to unslice in one go, I can follow the approach of clicking on this clear filter one by one. Alternatively, I'll show you in one go you can unslice or unfilter all the slices. To unfilter or unslice all the slices, first of all, you have applied the slices. Just click on any one cell on the table, click on the data tab, and in the data tab, in the sort and filter section, you will see a command called clear, which is enabled. I'll just click on this clear command, and you can see all the data getting unsliced or unfiltered. This is the way how you unslice your data. Okay. Now the next thing which I want to teach you people here is how to freeze my rows. Now I have unsliced my data. Let me scroll down. The moment I scroll down my data, my first row and the second row, my first row is basically the slicers and my second row is the column heading. Both of them disappear the moment I scroll down. So how do I freeze these 2 rows? So ideally people, I want the first row and the second row to be frozen. In order to freeze the first 2 rows, please identify a point where you want to start the freezing, which means I want the freezing to start from cell A3. I click on cell A3. Now to freeze my 2 rows, I click on the view tab, and in the view tab you will find a command called freeze panes. So click on this freeze panes command. Now in the freeze panes, when you click, you will see 3 options. Please click on the first option called freeze panes. Now people, let me scroll down. Now if you scroll down, you can see that the first 2 rows are frozen. Okay, so this is how you freeze the rows. Now the next thing which I want to teach you is how to glue your slicers, or how to super glue, or how to drill your slicer, how to fix your slicers. Now let's say we made this Excel file into a table and added the slicers, and accidentally the slicer got moved like this. I don't want the slices to be moved automatically like this, which means I want the slices to be glued permanently. So now the next feature which I am going to teach you is how to glue the slicers, or how to fix the slices permanently. So now in order to glue the slices or fix the slices, I want to glue all my 4 slicers. So to do this, as a step 1, please select any one slicer. When I say select on any one slicer, don't click inside the slicer, click anywhere on the top of the slicer. The moment you click on the slicer, you can see this circles here, which means my location slicer is selected. But I want to select all the slicers. I want to select the department, job level and cost center. Now in order to select all the slicers, I will press Ctrl A shortcut key to select all slicers. Now the moment I press Ctrl A, people, you can see my location slicer is selected, my department is selected, job level and cost center slicer. So as many number of slices you have in the Excel sheet, all the slices will be selected by pressing Ctrl A. So first step is select any one slicer. The next step is press Ctrl A to select all the slicers. Now all the slicers are selected. Now the next step is, on any one of these slicer, just hover your mouse. You can see my mouse on the location slicer. I will right click from my mouse. I will right click, and now once I right click, you will get this drop down. In this drop down, you need to select an option called size and properties. So please click on size and properties. The moment I click on size and properties, you can see a window on the right hand side of my Excel screen, which is called as the format slicer window. In this format slicer window, there are different sections. The first section is the position and layout. The next section is size, properties and alt layout. All these sections can be expanded and collapsed. So now in order to glue my slicer, I will request you to expand the position and layout section. I am clicking on this arrow mark. The moment I expand this, the position and layout will expand and it will give me different features in that particular section. Now in this section you will find an option called disable resizing and moving. By default it is unchecked. I need to check this option. The moment I check this option and I close this window, my slicers are glued. Now if I try to move my slicer cannot be moved. My slicers are permanently glued. By doing this, people, I cannot move my slicer, I cannot resize, meaning to say I cannot increase the height or width of my slicer or decrease the height and width of my slicer. The only thing which I can do when I have glued the slicer is I can change the color of the slicer. So I can just click on the slicer, go to options tab and apply a color. So all my slicers color can be changed, but I cannot move my slicer nor I can resize the slicer. This is called gluing of my slicer. Now one more topic which I want to teach in the slicer is, now I have inserted 4 slices: location, department, job level and cost center. Now I have a requirement in this data where I want to know how many employees have joined in a particular year called 2006 or 2007 or 2008. I have a column called hire date, column C. I can insert a slicer on hire date, but as I told you in the beginning of this video, that if I insert a slicer on the hire date, each employee has a different hire date. I cannot group them to know which all employees have joined in a particular year. So now I am going to teach a concept of adding a calculated column to my raw data. My raw data is from column A to column I. This is my raw data. Now I am going to add a calculated column for me to add a new slicer for the year. So now people, next to my salary column, in column J, next to the salary column, I am going to type a column heading called hire year. And I press enter. So the moment I type this column heading, it becomes the part of my table. And now I am going to calculate the year by using a function called text. So the function which is used to get the year from a given date is equal to text open bracket. Let me scroll to the left. I have a hire date. I will select the cell reference as C3 because the hire date is in C3, comma, double quotes, and the format to extract the full year is YYY. Let me give you 3 Ys. If I enter 3 Ys, I will get the complete year. I will close the double quotes, close the bracket, control enter. And now you can see in column J, I have got the year for each of the hire dates. Now people, I am going to insert a new slicer on the new column which I added called the hire year. Now to insert a slicer, my selection should be inside the table. I click on the insert tab and I click on the command called slicer. Now in this rectangular box, people, you can see a new column heading called hire year has been added. I select this hire year and I click on OK. Now why am I getting blue? Because when I added my slicers, I selected the blue slicer style as a default style. So hence I am getting the blue color. Now let me arrange my slicer next to the cost center. Let me reduce the height. So how do I reduce the height? First select the slicer, click on the options tab, and in the size command, let me reduce the height of the slicer. I have reduced the height of the slicer. By default, the data is shown in one column. I will change it to 2 or 3 columns, or let's say 4 columns. Let it make it 4 columns, but I cannot read all the entries. Let me increase the width. It is done. Let me change the color of this slicer. Let me change it to orange. Okay, now people, all the other 4 slicers are already glued. I want to glue this slicer because this slicer is not glued. I can move it still, but I want to glue the slicer. So in order to glue the slicer, I need to click on the slicer, right click, size and properties. I need to expand the position and layout option, and I select on disable resizing and moving, and I close this window. My slicer is glued. Now I can slice on the hire year 2006. I can glue. Okay, people, one more thing I want to tell you. Can we do multiple selections in a given slicer? Meaning to say, in the location slicer, I want to select Dubai. Now Dubai is selected. Now in the location slicer, only Dubai is selected. But I want to know how many employees are working for Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Can I do that? Yes, which means multiple selections in the same slicer. Now already Dubai is selected. To do a multiple selection, hold the control key of your keyboard and just click on Abu Dhabi if you want Abu Dhabi also to be selected, and leave the cursor. So now in the location slicer, Dubai and Abu Dhabi are selected. I can do also multiple selections in any slicer, and to do multiple selections in any slicer, I just need to click on the control key of my keyboard and click on the respective entry which I want to select. Let me unslice the data, and by the way, all the slices are interdependent. Okay, so people, this is the topic about tables and slicers. I hope all of you have learned and enjoyed this topic. Thank you.